On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks go down in the home opener against the New York Knicks on this Friday evening in Atlanta. We'll touch on all of what transpired, where the Hawks fell short, what issues might persist in the future, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1576 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening into Saturday. And today's show is brought to you by Dave. Download Dave today at dave.com/LockedOnNBA. Get to $500 in 5 minutes or less, no credit check, and no late fees. Also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do on the show, to make it your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks, please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts, places like YouTube on the video side, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. And today's show, we'll break down what became a frustrating, narrow loss for the Hawks at home, 126-120 at the hands of the Knicks at State Farm Arena in the home opener. The Hawks were down actually all night long, really. They had one lead in the game. It was early. There were two shots that the Hawks had in the air in the second half to take the lead. Neither one of those fell. They were down by 7 points with 50 seconds to go and looked to be kind of dead to rights. And then basically, they had like a 10% win probability at that point in time, but then the Knicks almost basically imploded. They tried to give the game to the Hawks, or at least let the Hawks stay in the game, which we'll come back to later on in more detail, and left the door open for the Hawks, but the Hawks could not run through that open door. They kind of refused to take the game back. A couple bad misses from like Capella down the stretch. Trae Young missed one at the rim in the final minutes, and a rough one all the way around for Atlanta, and the end result was a 6-point loss at home. Big picture, though, I want to lead with this. The Hawks played well on offense for the most part in this game, other than maybe Trae and a couple of other little things. And they did play better, I thought, on the whole, than they did on Wednesday. And look, losing to the Knicks at home is not a devastating defeat in terms of like unacceptable. Obviously, they were favored on Wednesday. They were not favored tonight, actually. But at the same time, and also they were down against 7 with under a minute to go. You're supposed to lose that one. But regardless, there were mistakes, and certainly everyone talked about all kinds of stuff post-game about like missed opportunities and being more consistent and all that stuff. In fact, I want to play you some sound. Quinn Snyder came in to the press conference room and gave an opening statement without a question. And I'm going to play that for you now. Just by the way, forgive Quinn's voice. It was already shot in pregame, so he's a little bit raspy here. But here is what Quinn had to say when he sat down after the game.
I think you can point to a lot of things, but kind of the umbrella, I guess, for me is just our lack of execution in, a lot of different situations. Things that I know that we've talked about, we've worked on, and, we've got to be more focused in the course of a game, and we've got to communicate to one another in order to do those things. It wasn't just one or two things. It was a number of things, and we put ourselves in a position where we have a chance to win. I was obviously happy with the way we battled back in the fourth quarter. But we made too many mistakes relative to, execution on the game plan, contesting a shot. I thought we started doing, when we did some of those things, we saw some success. And it just, as I said, it's a question of, doing them all the time.
So you hear it there, obviously, from Quinn. Nobody's happy about what transpired. They had missed opportunities. It wasn't just one thing at the end of the game, although obviously we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But anyway, for me, some takeaways from this one, sort of observationally and also just from my analysis, it's a defense-first loss for the Hawks in a lot of ways. Keep in mind, the NBA games are 48 minutes, so obviously a lot of focus at the end of the game. But the Hawks actually lost this game defensively in the first 3 quarters for me, and also when they were, again, down 7 with like a minute to go. I thought they were better defensively in the fourth quarter, although the entire game kind of grinded to a halt in the fourth at times. I think both teams looked to be tired to me, maybe because that was kind of a high-paced, high-action game before that. But even after all of that, the Knicks had about a 120 offensive rating in the game. And look, New York was pretty good on offense last year. They were top 5 in the league in offense, but you can't allow that kind of scoring efficiency in a game where you weren't like flying super high on offense. They did a pretty good job around the rim, actually held the Knicks to 40 points in the paint. That's a good number. In fact, the Knicks had 11th percentile rim frequency in this game. So they were kind of, it's a credit to Atlanta's big men in particular, kind of just walling off the paint. But The Knicks also made 20 3-pointers in this game, including 19 in the first 3 quarters. Some of that, I will say, is a tip of the cap to the Knicks. They made a lot of shots. In this one, they were 14 of 28 on non-corner threes, the more difficult attempts. So that's obviously very good. But some of it was also bad defense from the Hawks. I didn't love the overall plan. The Hawks were being a little bit too aggressive for me as far as like doubling Julius Randle, etc. And that's kind of the plan, though. I think that the Hawks, after the last couple of years, are pivoting more in a more aggressive, kind of opportunistic, habit-creating defense direction. And this is one of the downsides. I talked about this a lot in preseason. One of the downsides to doing more aggression on the defensive end of the floor is that you can have more breakdowns, more rotations, and kind of allow more threes. In this game, that bit them. They ended up with 8 steals. That's a good number, but only 3 or 4 of those in the first 3 quarters. For example, they allowed 44 3-point attempts. That's a ton. That would have led the league last year. So you're kind of hoping that the other team misses. And in that standpoint, the Knicks, to their credit, made shots, but the Hawks were also below average in terms of turnover creation and defensive rebounding and free throw prevention. So they basically were not good at anything defensively in this game by the numbers. They allowed 16 fast 3 points. That's actually way too many as well. And overall, the Knicks had a 93rd percentile half-court offensive efficiency. So when things were not running and gunning, the Knicks were able to score at a high level, and that's a good way to get yourself beat, especially in a home game when you cannot get stops. And that's been a familiar Hawks problem. In some ways, this game was much more aligned to the Hawks the last couple of years as far as like losing on the defensive end of the floor. On Wednesday, it was the offense that let them down. Tonight, it was the defense. Speaking of the offense, the Hawks were pretty good, I would say, on the whole in this game offensively. Now, there were things to nitpick, as we'll talk about in a second. They were much better on Wednesday than they were on Wednesday on offense. They had about a 115-ish offensive rating in this game. That is pretty good. It's not elite, but it's pretty good. They took half their shots at the rim. That's a very good sign. 54 points in the paint is also a pretty good number. And they also made 12 threes, and that's not a bad number at all. But like New York, they actually were cold in the fourth quarter, and they only took 32 three-point attempts. So more than Wednesday, I am confident, though, that Quinn Snyder wants to take more than 32 threes, especially if you're going to allow 44. And I always hear from people that don't really buy into this. I totally get it. But in general, analytically friendly coaches like Quinn do not want to take 12 fewer threes in a game than your opponent, basically. And that's where we are at this point in time. In fact, that would have been well below league average in terms of attempts, 32 for the full game. They did have 30 free throw attempts. They only had 14 turnovers compared to 28 assists. Those are all really good numbers. But I have to also say that Trae Young was really bad efficiency-wise, again, in this game. He was 4-16 from the floor. Trae is struggling as far as his own shooting is concerned. Now, there are other factors. He's obviously a fantastic passer, but through 2 games, Trae Young is 8 of 35 from the floor. And it is going to be hard for the Hawks to do what they need to do when he does that. Now, is it impossible? No, obviously not. In fact, they got a lot out of DeAndre Hunter in this game on offense. They got a lot of Bogdanovich in this game on offense to offset some of that. But Murray wasn't great either. He had 18 points on 18 shooting possessions. That's also not terribly efficient. But in general, Trae and DeJounte have to be better. They weren't as bad, I didn't think, as they were on Wednesday offensively. But the Hawks kind of, I don't want to say wasted, but they in the end, they kind of wasted a really good Hunter game, a pretty good Bogey game, and not where they actually made some threes because they couldn't get stops and also because Trae wasn't his best self. So we'll get into that more specifically later on in the podcast. But for me anyway, a defense-first loss and a game the Hawks really lost in the first 47 minutes, more so than the final minute when the Knicks were trying to get the game back to the Hawks, and they could have taken it for sure. But in the end, it was more about the first 47 for me. Just for some context before we move on to the observation part of the podcast, the Hawks were 2-2 against the Knicks last year. These teams are pretty similar in terms of their projections. The Knicks were probably a little bit higher than the Hawks in most places. Both teams pretty healthy in this one as well. But by tip-off, the friends at FanDuel that we have over there had the Hawks as a 1.5-point underdog at home, which basically tells you that the market believes the Knicks are better than the Hawks because they were favored in the game, also being on the road with a neutral rest environment. So all that said, losing this game, not like the sky is falling. Again, you're playing a much better opponent than you were playing on Wednesday, but still, that is kind of the big picture. And now we'll drill down to the specific pictures of this game as far as how the game went. And we'll talk about crunch time, etc. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Dave. And at one time or another, we all need a little bit of financial help. That's why Dave is great. Dave can get you cash when you need a hand between paychecks. It can help you build credit by settling extra cash TM advances on time. Dave is a banking app that helps you level the playing field financially. When you download Dave, you get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's just part of Dave's Extra Cash TM account. Advance the money you need with no interest and settle up later. Extra Cash TM gives you more money to buy groceries, fill your tank, finally get your car repaired, or catch up on bills without having to actually wait for your next paycheck. You can even build credit when you settle up on time. Millions of folks have already downloaded the Dave app to make their finances easier. So if you're in a pinch, get the help you need by downloading Dave. Download Dave right now today at dave.com/lockedonnba. That is dave.com/lockedonnba. Gets $500 in 5 minutes or less with no credit check and no late fees. Download the Get Dave app now or go to dave.com/lockedonnba. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Today's show is brought to you by Jase Medical. There is a lot of uncertainty in the world today. It's important to be prepared, and that's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase Medical now offers you different choices for your Jase Case with dozens of add-on medications available. Choose the medications that fit best for you and your family's unique needs, and they are always continually working to expand the medication offerings at Jase Medical with new additions all the time. With Jase Medical, you can also buy a gift card for family or loved ones so they can actually get a Jase Case of their own. And with Jase Medical, you will not be caught unprepared, something I know is quite valuable in any aspect of life. Go to jasemedical.com and enter promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That is promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. jasemedical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. All right, back to the top in this one, and that is with the outset. The Hawks actually took and missed threes on their first 3 trips down the floor, which is obviously an emphasis after the game on Wednesday, it felt like. Defensively, it was DeJounte on Jalen Brunson who had a tough time, all things considered. It was Bay on Julius Randle, which didn't necessarily work or not work in some ways. They kind of were over-aggressive, doubling him, etc. I thought Hunter started things out aggressively, and that continued the entire game. He had a nice help side block attempt on Mitchell Robinson. He was called for a foul, but that's totally fine. Be more aggressive there. Good to see him defensively kind of making some havoc plays. Hunter had a nice cut early in the game as well. A nice pass by Bay for a bucket. Actually had 2 fouls, and they stay with him, which just makes sense. I know he fouled out of the game on Wednesday, but Hunter is generally a pretty low foul player, unlike, let's just say, a Kongwu, for instance. But the Hawks actually missed their first 5 threes again, which is crazy because they ended up 12 of 32, which is a pretty good number. But at one point, they were 5 of 34 for the season from 3. That's 14.7%. Kind of brutal. Rotationally, it was very, very similar to Wednesday. And we'll talk about this more later on, but it was essentially an 8.5-man rotation in this game. AJ Griffin played basically 2 stints of 4 minutes. He played 8 minutes in the game. Everybody else played at least 20 minutes, and that was a Kongwu with 20. Everybody else was over 26 minutes. So it was very, very spread out. 35 each for Trae and DeJounte is typical, but 30 for Jalen, 32 for Hunter, 28 Capella, 26 Bay, 26 Bogey. It was very, very, very balanced, but clearly AJ Griffin is 9 out of 9, which we talked about a little bit on Wednesday, but that was even more stark in this game. The first run went to New York, as you might have referenced, considering that they never trailed basically the entire rest of the game. The Hawks were actually down by 10 in a hurry after a first run by the Knicks. That was actually their first 10-point deficit of the season after they were within 7 the entire time in Charlotte. But the probably the positive highlight of the night was the ridiculous dunk by Jalen Johnson annihilating Isaiah Hartenstein on a dunk. I'm sure you've seen it by now if you listen to this podcast. If you haven't, you can find it on social media, I'm sure. But Jalen kept just rising in a way that he is just a monster athlete, and he's so long. It was really on 2 different guys, but Hartenstein got the brunt of it at the back of things. But that was a fun moment. The arena popped, etc. A big time play from Jalen. Trae came back in after a Hornets run, slowed things down a little bit. The Murray plus bench unit did not work in this game. Trae plus bench was better. They set up a 3 for AJ at one point. Trae went by himself. Actually, the Hawks, after making only 5 threes on Wednesday, hit 3 of them in about a minute in the first quarter, which was nice to see. But they were down by 4 at the end of the first quarter, not because of the offense. Again, they scored at a high level. They had 9 assists in the first quarter, but defensively they allowed 5 threes, 10 free throw attempts, etc. The Hawks actually climbed all the way back from basically down by 10 all the way down to a tie once again. Again, it was less of AJ than you might expect. They actually went back to Bay as the small forward in that lineup early in the second quarter and fourth quarters alongside Jalen. That kind of explains why Griffin played less. But defensively, it was pretty rough at times. In fact, the worst lineup probably that I saw defensively was that Trae, Bogey, Bay perimeter group, which is kind of unsustainable, I think. You kind of have to score at a high level. Not that DeJounte is great because he's not defensively, in my opinion. I've been pretty critical of that. But Trae, Bogey, and Bay on the perimeter defensively is just it's kind of untenable, honestly. Just really couldn't get stops. I'm going to repeat that a lot, I'd imagine, in this podcast, but it's pretty rough. They did have a nice 7-0 run in the middle of the quarter after Hunter actually had a nice kick-out pass to Bogey for a three. Not like a crazy Trae level pass, but a good read and a good delivery from DeAndre. And then Jalen had a dunk in transition. There was a possession that I wanted to highlight, actually, that it did not go the Hawks' way, but Trae got caught as the low man defensively and was only him between Mitchell Robinson, who's a 7-foot behemoth, and the rim. And Trae, smartly in my mind, gambled for a steal on a pass, and he didn't get it. So it was like one of those things, like it kind of looked bad. But if you take stock of that, like if Trae just sits back, Mitchell Robinson's going to grab the ball and dunk it because Trae can't do anything there. Maybe he can foul him, but that's the best case scenario. But Trae had a decent chance, I thought, if you watch the replay back, to get the steal. He didn't get it. But I actually thought it was a pretty smart gamble, quote unquote, from Trae. Anyway, just a small thing there that I wanted to point out. The Knicks had a nice little run at the end of the first half to go up by 11. The Hawks they got it back within 8. There was a bad possession at the very, very end. Trae took a pretty bad long two on the last possession, and the Hawks broke down in transition. A lot of dunk at the buzzer, bad concentration, and something that I think Quinn was referencing earlier about just the fact that they were not consistent in this game. It was the best offensive half of the season. Still, through 4 halves, that was their best offensive performance in that first half. They scored 61 points on 49 possessions. That's very, very good. Hunter had 16, played very well. They shot well from 3, etc. They did have 9 turnovers that led to 15 points for the Knicks. That's not what you want. But Trae was 1 of 9. He and Jonte were still struggling. And defensively, they gave up 140 defensive rating in the first half. Rough. After that, the Hawks were better. I mean, the Hawks were down by 8 at the half. And they lost by 6, but it was really, a 2-point game at the very, very end. They were overhelping too much, again, allowing too many semi-open or open threes. But the Knicks were scalding hot. Jalen Brunson had 8 threes in the first, 2.5 quarters. They were red hot in general. The Hawks did play well on offense to catch up, to sort of keep up, I would say, in the third quarter. Trae actually waved AJ onto the ball for a step-back three that he made. But again, late in the quarter, a 10-2 run by the Knicks to close things out. Some flashbacks to those old Cavs series where the Hawks are just giving up way too many threes against Bud Scheme, etc. 19 threes from New York in 3 quarters, only 4 steals, all that's it. In the fourth, they were down by 11, actually, again, after a really, really bad mistake, actually. Isaiah Hartenstein was at the free throw line, missed a free throw, and then got his own rebound and dunked. That just cannot happen for anyone. The shooter should be the easiest box out that you have. They missed it. All that said, that was a total breakdown to go down by 11 points. It was pretty sloppy, though, I will say, in the fourth on both sides. Again, I think they were probably a little bit tired. But there was a 10-0 run by the Hawks to get back within 1. And from there, it was pretty close the last 8 minutes of this game. Okongwu struggled on the glass against Mitchell Robinson, who's a great rebounder, I will say. Maybe a top 5 guy in the league on the glass. But Okongwu looked small in that matchup. I will have to admit that. Again, I mentioned once before, the Hawks had 2 shots in the air for the lead in the entire second half. One was the AJ 3 that was short, and then Hunter had one in the air with about 6 to go, also short. Pulled the string on that one, and there you go. Couple of bad offensive possessions, though. Murray drove into the crowd at one point and got blocked. Jalen missed a jump shot pretty badly at one point. They were able to keep it close because nobody scored for a while. There was 1 point scored in 3 minutes, middle of the fourth quarter. The Hawks went back to starters actually for a couple of minutes. As my friend Tyler Jones, I will credit him for this. It seemed like, to me, they wanted to close with Jalen, which they ended up doing, but Jalen would have had to play a long, long time in a row. So a quick blow for him, and then it was back to Jalen down the stretch. But the Hawks were down by 4 with 2:15 to go out of a timeout. Murray got a decent look from about 10 feet and missed it with 2 minutes to go. I didn't love that process. That wasn't a terrible shot, but out of a timeout, I expect better than that probably in that spot. And then a corner three by Julius Randle. So this is one that I talked about on Twitter. I already had typed in my notes that was the biggest swing of the game. Again, Hawks down by 4. Decent look by Murray again, but misses it. And then Randle hits a tough corner 3, and they're down by 7. And at that point, the Hawks are big underdogs already at that moment. And then Clint Capella missed the first of his 2 bad missed bunnies down the stretch. So if you throw that in there, it's even worse. But I already thought that, and then you throw in the Capella one, it was pretty rough. So then, again, the Hawks are down by 7 with 50 seconds to go. And that's a really, really tough spot. But then Hunter hits a 3, and then Trae gets a steal, gets fouled right away. So it's a 5-point swing in about 20 seconds. to go from down 7 to down by 2. And then the Knicks turned it over after a timeout just in horrific fashion at midcourt. Like just a terrible turnover by the Knicks. And then, as you all I'm sure have seen by now, Trae creates, throws a lob over Mitchell Robinson, who looked like he might have like maybe deflected it a little bit, but it was a great pass by Trae. And then Clint just botches it. And I know that I have a reputation for defending Clint. There's no defending Clint on these two plays. He could have grabbed it and come down if he wasn't ready to shoot that ball at that point in time. The first one that he missed, it felt like he was caught in between mentally on whether to dunk it or whether to lay it in. That happens, but it was bad. No question about that. The second one, he kind of just lost the ball. It gets to be kind of funny because Capella is super efficient and finishes well around the rim in a lot of ways, but also when he misses like this, it is enraging. And I always say that, acknowledge it. There's no defending these two plays. It can't happen in that spot. He would tell you that. Anyone would tell you that. These guys are pros. Can't happen. It becomes a referendum on Capella as a player, which that's what drives me crazy because he's still a good player. But two awful plays can't be explained. And then after the Hawks foul, Trae comes down and misses a layup as well. So the Hawks literally missed 3 flat-out layup/dunks in the last 90 seconds of the game. Now, they probably lose anyway if Trae makes his because you still have to foul at that point in time, down by 2. But they were still in the game if that goes in. And when it missed, it was over, basically. So Clint's were way worse, don't get me wrong. But the Hawks missed 3 layups literally in like 5 possessions in the last 2 minutes of the game. Pretty frustrating. So all that said, like it's a frustrating loss. We'll leave it there for now. I'll come back to the player stuff in a second. I wouldn't say it's a terrible loss because, again, you're playing a pretty good team. You were literally the underdog coming into the night. And also, the Hawks never led this game. Like, I know it felt like they collapsed, quote unquote, at the end because of Capella's misses. They were trailing the entire way. And you could argue that even if Capella makes that second one to tie the game, New York has the ball. Like, it wasn't like they were in this commanding position. So, maddening for sure. The Knicks actively tried to give the Hawks back the game after taking it away, and the Hawks didn't take it. So, frustrating stuff, but I'm required to say by law, it's one of 82 because it is. And I understand all the angst and a tough one on Sunday that's looming, which we'll talk about later on in this podcast. But one, the Hawks could have stolen for sure, but they were not necessarily like quote unquote the better team in this game. The Knicks shot the heck out of the ball, which has happened sometimes. And anyway, I'll stop rambling there for now. All right, a break now from our sponsors, and we'll come back talk about the individual player stuff from this contest. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and PrizePicks is a skill-based, real-money daily fantasy sports game. And at PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 6 players, choose whether they'll actually have more or less than a certain number of PrizePicks projection points, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's just you against the numbers at PrizePicks, not against other people. It's just you against the projections. An entry at PrizePicks can also be done in just a minute or less. That makes life very easy for you. And PrizePicks also offers improved deposit and withdrawal experiences, including the option to use Apple Pay for quick deposits. They have discounts as well, plus bonuses and other exciting offers like Taco Tuesday and Flex Friday. And they have a huge selection of sports and stat types not offered anywhere else, and that includes projections on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, and much more. They're operational in more than 30 states plus Canada, and PrizePicks is the best way to have action in more than 70% of the country. I really enjoyed all the offerings for PrizePicks, dating back to baseball season, now basketball and football ramping up as well. I'm really looking forward to diving in all season long. And on the whole, the experience with PrizePicks is really easy and really fun. I highly recommend it. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA is the place to go. Use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. One more time, that is PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use promo code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Check out daily fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. All right, and only 9 guys played, and again, it was really an 8.5-man rotation in this one. AJ Griffin played 8 minutes. He actually took 4 threes. I love that from AJ. If he's out there, get them up. That is a ready-made skill for him. He made 2 of them. Trae said after the game, like it's like kind of the first time they've had a coach that's like actively pushing threes like this, which is obviously not what Nate was doing. But AJ, would I mind if he played more? No, but I think he certainly is viewed as the last guy in the rotation right now. 6 points in 8 minutes, 2 rebounds. He looked fine, took 4 threes. We'll leave it there. Okongwu, 20 minutes, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 steals and a block, 4 fouls. He now has, I believe it's 9 fouls in 39 minutes of action. That's way too many. That's a problem for him. I thought he was not very good in this game. Not that he was like glaringly bad by any means, but it's a tough matchup for him, admittedly. Like, the Knicks have two very big active centers in Robinson and Hartenstein. Not stars, but guys who are good players, and they're much bigger than him. I thought Okongwu was kind of just like weirdly mid for him. Not awful, but not a huge factor either. And rebounding wise, he was rough. We'll leave it there. Bogey was good in this one, 16 points, hit 4 threes on 9 attempts. He took 9 threes. That's a lot of threes. 3 assists and a steal for Bogey. 2 of 2 on twos actually in this game. I thought he was a big plus. And again, he and Hunter were both like kind of wasted effort on offense, unfortunately, but they both played well to kind of paper over what happened in the backcourt. Jalen was very good again. Not quite as ridiculous like play to play as he was against Charlotte, but a couple of huge highs. The dunk was mesmerizing. 11 points, 9 rebounds, had a steal and 2 assists. To turn over 3 times, not great necessarily, but 0 of 2 from 3, 5 of 6 on twos, missed 2 free throws. The Hawks actually missed a couple free throws at the end of the game. Trae missed 1, and then Jalen missed 2, I think, in the second half at one point. But anyway, I thought Jalen was pretty good. He was not probably as dominant as some people might have thought in this one, but I thought he was active. And by the way, played 30 minutes off the bench. That's a lot of minutes, and I think he earned them in this game. To the starters, I thought the Hawks' worst player in this game was Saddiq Bey. I thought Bey was really pretty bad. 5 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 block, 1 turnover in 26 minutes. Only took 4 shots, only took 2 threes. If he's going to play, he's got to shoot. And because that is his primary appeal, is his 3-point shooting and his spacing. And he's also good at bully ball stuff too, and in the right matchup. But the Knicks are pretty stout, so like that wasn't really on the table for him in this game. He's got a bomb more than he did in this game, and then defensively, it was rough. Now, I said it once before, or maybe twice before, I didn't like the game plan a lot that the Hawks were using. I thought, Bey is not a great defender by any means. In fact, he was not good in this game. But I would have rather had him go one-on-one with Julius Randle than having them throw a lot of doubles at him and create open threes. And then when Bey was on with Jalen, they didn't even let Jalen go one-on-one with Randle. It's just a very strange thought process there, I thought. But, again, I'm not saying Bey was like unplayable, but he was not very good. I think that was pretty obvious, and he might have played too much by the end of the game. Let's just do this now. Clint Capella, 28 minutes, 13 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. 1 turnover, 3 fouls. He was 6 of 12 on the floor and 1 2 at the free throw line. Obviously, the 2 misses at the end are indefensible. I'm not even going to try to defend them. I do think he played fairly well before that. Now, I do think, and also, as I said on Twitter tonight, I think he was pretty clearly their best center in this game. Now, that's not always the case. I think Okongwu is often, or at least sometimes, as good or better than he is in a game. But this is not one of those games where I thought it was like bad to close with Capella. As Glenn's talked about a lot, my friend Glenn Willis on this podcast and other places, like usually the Hawks will close smaller if they are losing, and they were losing in this game. But I think Okongwu just didn't really play very well, and Capella was better. So I understood why they closed with him. Unfortunately, that did not work out, obviously, for clear reasons. And again, I think there's just more nuance than Capella's trash or whatever people are saying now. I do think, and this is something that I know my friend Howard Jones and I will talk about at some point on this podcast because he's a little bit lower on Capella in general. I think his point is a good one. I don't think Capella fits that well with what the Hawks are doing right now and doesn't look fantastic athletically. Like, look, Clint is not the same athlete that he was a few years ago. But that's just science. It's just what happens. But I also think the Hawks are running the scheme right now defensively that's much more aggressive, and it really plays well for guys like, let's just say, Jalen Johnson or DeJounte Murray, even, like guys who are kind of more predicated on havoc creation and being rangy and all that stuff. This system that they're running right now is not good for Clint. And it feels like they're putting the system in a lot for the future that they kind of probably know Clint won't be a part of. And that's okay. It's a big picture conversation about what, kind of scheme now versus an install versus like what's the best to win today versus what's the win for the future, what the goals are, etc. All that said, and that's a whole longer conversation that we can have at a later date. I don't think Clint's being put in the best position for him, but that's also that's not what the Hawks are trying to do. Like, it's not about putting Clint in a great position. So I think he played fine tonight. I really do. I think he was pretty good for the majority of the game. He also made 2 very, very bad plays in a high leverage moment at the end of the game. Would they have won if he makes those? I don't know for sure. Would they have had a better chance? Of course they would have. So it's just one of those things. It's going to stick out. I think people have a tendency to forget the first 46 minutes of the game, and I would stress that you probably not do that because I think he was their best center tonight. And I think Quinn pretty much clearly agreed with that because he played him in crunch time. Well, he didn't have to, But there's also no excuse whatsoever for those last two plays. And I'm sure Clinton would raise his hand and admit that in any form. Okay, last three guys. DeAndre Hunter was good in this game. I know he's been the object of a lot of scorn by Hawks fans, along with Clint. But I think after Wednesday, it felt like Hunter got even probably the most negative attention, almost just for existing. Like, I don't think he was very good on Wednesday, but like I don't think he was nearly as bad as Hawks fans were talking about him being. But he was good in this game. 27 points to lead all scores for the Hawks. 8 of 13 from the floor, 8 free throw attempts, and made all 8 of them. 3 of 7 from 3. That's a good number. 6 rebounds, had a block, no turnovers. Like, Hunter was good in this game. Played good defense. Was he perfect there? No, because nobody was. But I thought it was one of his better games in a while. Of course, the big question is whether he could do this regularly. And I'll acknowledge that. First, I'm a little bit skeptical of that. He's been doing this, this is year 5. But I think he played legitimately well. And if the Hawks could have this Hunter, that would be really big for them long term. Because you would figure and assume, as we talk about this in a second, that DeJounte and Trae will be better than they've been so far. You would hope that that's the case, or they're going nowhere fast. But if you can get this kind of Hunter perform, not necessarily with this efficiency, because he was 27 points on 17 shots, it's not going to happen very often for Hunter. But I thought he was just good and aggressive. He was attacking free throw attempts, the 3-pointers. He was assertive defensively. I like what I saw in a lot of ways. DeJounte, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. That all looks fine. Had a steal and a block as well. He wasn't very good in this game. Again, he was not efficient. 18 points on 8 of 17 from the floor. Not terrible efficiency, but not good. Defensively, he's still not really what I think he should be, or at least that the Hawks hoped he would be. And like a lot of just questionable shots, not terrible shots, but only 3 threes. Took a bunch of mid-rangers, made a few of them, but a couple of bad misses at times, a couple of bad process decisions. I don't think he was awful, but he's got to be better. And there'll be more attention on Trae, and that's part of the gig. And also, Trae's just better than DeJounte, so I get that's why. But I think of the two of them, despite the better shooting numbers, I think DeJounte has been worse than Trae through 2 games. So I'll leave it there. And finally, Trae Young. So 18 points, 12 assists, 3 steals for Trae. That looks totally fine. But he was 2 of 11 on 2s. Yikes. 2 of 5 on 3 is actually fine, 40%, and the 8 of 10 at the free throw line. So it's really the shooting inside the arc in this game. But he is now, I believe he's like 8 of 35 from the floor in 2 games. It's 2 games. That ain't good. I will just say I don't know what to make of this, like value judgment wise, but I'll just say Trae has always, or at least almost always, been a slow starter in his career. In fact, last year he shot sub 40% from the field in October. That was his worst month of the year, and on that metric. He had his worst 3-point shooting month of any month 2 years ago in October. There was no October in 2020-21 after the pandemic shortened season, but he actually shot less than 40% from the field in his first full month that year as well. If you look at his career splits, he has his worst field goal percentage in any month in October, and his worst true shooting percentage of any month in October. And that is before you get into tonight being 4-16 from the floor, 18 points on 21 shooting possessions. So obviously, Trae's not been very good by Trae standards the first 2 games. I think the biggest reason, as I said on the show Wednesday, that the Hawks lost in Charlotte was because of the guards. They were not very good. Tonight, I wouldn't say that was the biggest reason they lost tonight. I think it was the defense, but they have to get more from Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. And everyone knows it. Trae said it tonight again from the podium, like, I got to be better. Yes, that's correct. Am I worried? People keep asking me if I'm worried. No, I'm not worried about Trae. In fact, I worry more about DJ than Trae in a lot of ways. And if there is a worry about Trae Young, it's that he can't get back to the efficiency level he was at 2 years ago. That is a legitimate concern, and we have to see that from him. But do I think he's going to shoot 8 of 35 from the floor? No, I don't. So, and the passing has always been there. So was he good tonight? He absolutely was not. But yeah, it's more just like an observation and like a reality. Like, he's just not made shots for 2 games. And tonight it was inside the arc. Again, 2 of 11 on 2s is like really rough. Yeah, we'll leave it there for now. I have nothing else to add about Trae. Last thing before we get out of here on the podcast is a pretty tough schedule spot coming up for the Hawks as well. So at least it's early in the year. Guys' legs should still be pretty fresh. But Sunday's game is in Milwaukee. That is their toughest game on the schedule so far. The Bucks are quite good, and the game is on the road. Provided Milwaukee's key guys, Giannis, Dame Lillard, etc., play in that game, the Hawks will be underdogs, pretty obviously, in Milwaukee. They obviously can win the game. They're capable of that, but it's a tough spot. Then it's a back-to-back. It's pretty tough. The Hawks play at home on Monday, which is better than being on the road, but it's against Minnesota. The Wolves are off on Sunday, so it's a rest disadvantage for the Hawks in that game. And the Wolves are pretty good. I mean, they're not going to be a title contender, I don't think, this year, but the Wolves are a good team. So I don't really know what to make of that game either. We'll see more. The Wolves actually play on tomorrow, Saturday nights, against the Heat at home. So, look, it's a pretty tough spot. I think 1-1 on these two games would be a very nice result. Unfortunately, that would leave it 1-3. There is a non-zero chance the Hawks are 0-4 at the end of Monday, and that would cause, I'm sure, a lot of panic. And I get it, but yeah, not a great time to have to go to Milwaukee on Sunday after 2 losses. So we'll see how they fare in that game. They do have one of the easiest schedule spots imaginable on Wednesday next week. It's actually Washington at home, and Washington has the worst projected win total in the league according to FanDuel. So there's that. But in between now and then, two tough games. One on the road, one at home. Sunday and Monday. Sunday's in Milwaukee. Monday's at home against the Wolves. So stay tuned for all of that. We'll have full coverage. But look, in the end, as I sign off the podcast, the Hawks were not very good today, and that's defensively, it's a loss that you can live with in the big picture. It gets magnified because it's the second game of the season, and they lost the first game. But we'll have much more coming up on Sunday into Monday and talk all about that game and more in big picture context. We'll have guests on the show coming up. Please subscribe to the podcast as well. I really appreciate everyone for diving into the show already, but please subscribe and tell a friend. Check us out across podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Ratings and reviews, likes, all that fun stuff. Appreciated. Enjoy your weekend, everyone, and we'll see you after the game on Sunday.